I was shopping when I passed my son's therapist, the one who treats him since he lost the ability to walk. Through the window, I saw my daughter-in-law's jacket. I slipped in and heard her voice. I couldn't believe what she was confessing. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I never intended to become a spy in my own family's life. At 63, I thought I'd earned the right to simple pleasures. Saturday morning shopping on Main Street coffee with friends tending my small garden behind the house we'd lived in for 40 years. But that November afternoon when I passed Dr. Harrison's physical therapy office and saw that jacket through the window, everything I believed about my family began to unravel. The jacket was distinctive, a wine-colored quilted coat with brass buttons that I'd helped my daughter-in-law Michelle pick out last Christmas. She'd insisted it was too expensive, but I'd seen how her eyes lit up when she tried it on. "For all you do for Tony," I told her, pulling out my credit card before she could protest. Tony, my son, my only child. 6 months ago, a distracted driver ran a red light and changed everything. Tony's injuries were severe. A shattered pelvis, damaged spine, months of surgery and recovery ahead. The doctor said he might walk again, might not. The uncertainty was its own kind of torture. Michelle had been his rock through it all, driving him to appointments, managing his medications, sleeping on a cot beside his hospital bed those first terrible weeks. Or so I thought. I stood on the sidewalk, shopping bags cutting into my palms, staring at that jacket hanging on the coat rack, visible through Dr. Harrison's front window. It was 2:15 on a Thursday. Tony's appointment wasn't until 4 in. I knew because I'd offered to drive him myself, but Michelle had insisted she had it covered. The receptionist's desk was empty, probably on lunch break. The waiting room was quiet, just a few chairs and outdated magazines. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe Michelle had come early to discuss Tony's treatment plan. Maybe she'd forgotten something at a previous appointment. But something pulled me forward. Call it instinct. Call it a mother's intuition. Call it 63 years of learning to trust the whisper that says something isn't right. I pushed open the door as quietly as I could. The small bell above it gave the faintest chime. I froze, but no one appeared. The hallway stretched ahead, 3 doors on each side. The middle door on the left, Dr. Harrison's private office was slightly ajar, and I heard Michelle's voice. "I can't keep doing this," she was saying. Her voice was strained, emotional in a way I'd rarely heard. Every day I have to look at her and pretend. "You're doing remarkably well under the circumstances." That was Dr. Harrison. His voice was lower, harder to hear. Am I, because I feel like I'm losing my mind? When she looks at me with those trusting eyes offering to help bringing over casseroles like that's going to fix anything, my heart hammered. She was talking about me. Had to be. "The guilt is natural," Dr. Harrison said, "but you need to remember why we're doing this. For Tony's future, for yours." Silence. Then Michelle again, quieter now. "What if she finds out she's not stupid, Marcus? She's going to start asking questions." Marcus. She'd called him Marcus. Let her ask. Dr. Harrison replied, "We have everything documented. The accident, the injuries, the treatment plan, even if she suspects something." "What can she prove?" I pressed closer to the door, my ear nearly touching the frame. My pulse roared in my ears. "The settlement money," Michelle said. "It comes through next month. Once you have it, you proceed exactly as we discussed. Trust the process." And Tony a pause. "Tony will understand eventually, or he won't. Either way, he'll have no choice." I jerked back from the door, my shopping bags rustling. In that instant, one of the bags slipped from my numb fingers. A jar of pasta sauce tumbled out and rolled across the hardwood floor with a sound like thunder. The voices inside stopped. "Did you hear something?" Michelle asked. I didn't wait. I grabbed my fallen bag and moved as quickly as my aging knees would allow back through the waiting room, out the front door, across the street, to where my car was parked. My hands shook so badly, I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock the door. I sat in the driver's seat, breathing hard, staring at the therapy office across the street. 5 minutes later, Michelle emerged. She wasn't alone. Dr. Harrison stood in the doorway, his hand resting casually on the small of her back as they spoke. Too familiar, too intimate. Then she laughed at something he said, a genuine, bright laugh I hadn't heard from her in months, and walked to her car. She never saw me watching. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the house silent around me. My husband, Robert, had died 3 years ago. Sudden heart attack, gone before the ambulance arrived. I'd learned to live with the quiet since then, even found a certain peace in it. But tonight the silence felt suffocating. I pulled out my phone and looked at the family photo I kept as my wallpaper. Tony's wedding day 5 years ago. He looked so happy, so whole. Michelle in her white dress, radiant. Me between them, bursting with joy at seeing my son find his person. "What have you done, Michelle?" But I couldn't jump to conclusions. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation for everything I'd overheard. Even as I thought it, I knew better. I opened my laptop and searched for Dr. Marcus Harrison. His practice website appeared first. Standard professional biography credentials, patient testimonials. Nothing unusual. I clicked on images, and there it was, a photo from a charity gala 2 years ago. Dr. Harrison with a woman on his arm, both dressed formally. The caption identified her as his wife, Catherine. But when I looked more closely at the date, my stomach dropped. The gala had taken place 3 years after Tony and Michelle's wedding. I zoomed in on the photo. Catherine Harrison bore a striking resemblance to Michelle. Same dark hair, similar build. Even their smiles were alike. I sat back, my mind racing. What was I looking at, an affair? But it was more than that. The conversation I'd overheard wasn't about romance. It was about money, settlement money, and doing something to Tony. I thought about my son trapped in that wheelchair, trusting his wife completely, depending on her for everything. And she was planning something she and Dr. Harrison had been coordinating, something that would happen once the settlement money came through the accident settlement. Tony had been hit by a delivery truck whose driver was texting. The company's insurance was paying out. Michelle had mentioned it would be substantial enough to cover all medical expenses, and then some. Enough to set them up for life, she'd said, even if Tony never worked again. Once you have it, you proceed exactly as we discussed. I needed proof. Real, tangible proof of what they were planning. But I also needed to be smart. If Michelle suspected I knew something, she might accelerate whatever scheme she and Dr. Harrison had concocted. I had to investigate carefully, quietly. The problem was I had no idea where to start. I was a retired elementary school teacher, not a detective. My most daring act of rebellion in the past decade had been planting tomatoes, where Robert had wanted roses. I went to bed that night but didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Michelle's voice. When she looks at me with those trusting eyes, I trusted her completely, welcomed her into our family, loved her like the daughter I'd never had. And somehow that trust was being used against Tony, against all of us. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I didn't know what Michelle and Dr. Harrison were planning, but I was going to find out. My son's life, maybe even his survival, might depend on it. I just had to make sure they never knew I was looking. The first thing I did was call Michelle at 7:00 a.m., keeping my voice cheerful and normal. "Good morning, dear. I was thinking I'd come by around lunchtime. Bring some of that chicken soup Tony likes. How's he doing?" "Oh, that's sweet of you, Roxanne." Michelle's voice was bright, perfectly composed. "But actually, Tony has therapy this morning and he's been tired lately. Maybe give it a few days." Of course, you know best." I paused, then added casually, I thought his appointment was yesterday, Thursday at 4. A tiny hesitation. No, it's this morning. Thursdays and Tuesdays. Has been for weeks. She was lying. I'd seen the appointment card myself just last week. My mistake, I said lightly. These days all blend together. Give Tony my love. I hung up and stared at the phone in my hand. The lies had already started, and so had my investigation. The next 3 days, I became someone I barely recognized. I kept my routine exactly the same. Morning walks, Tuesday book club, volunteering at the library. But underneath the normally, I was watching, listening, piecing together a puzzle I didn't yet understand. I started with the simplest thing, Tony's therapy schedule. On Friday morning, I drove to Dr. Harrison's office and parked across the street far enough away to avoid notice. I felt ridiculous, a 63-year-old woman playing detective in her 10-year-old sedan. But I waited. At 9:30, a silver Honda pulled up, not Michelle's car. A young man in his 20s got out, retrieved crutches from the back seat, and headed inside. 45 minutes later, he emerged, then an elderly woman, then a teenage girl with a knee brace. No Tony, no Michelle. I checked my watch. According to Michelle, Tony's appointment should have been at 10:00. It was now 11:15. I waited until noon, then drove home, my mind spinning. That evening, I called Tony directly. His voice sounded tired, but genuinely happy to hear from me. "Mom, hey, sorry we haven't connected much this week. I know you're busy with therapy and everything," I said, trying to sound casual. "How did this morning's session go?" A pause. "This morning with Dr. Harrison. Michelle mentioned you had an appointment." "Oh, right. Yeah, it was good." Tough, but good. He's really pushing me. My heart sank. Tony was lying too, or he believed he'd been to therapy when he hadn't. "Honey, are you feeling all right? You sound exhausted." "Just the pain medication. I think makes me foggy sometimes. Michelle's been great about managing it all. I honestly don't know what I'd do without her." We talked for a few more minutes, but I could hear the effort in his voice. When we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, a cold certainty settling in my chest. Something was very, very wrong. Saturday morning, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to Tony and Michelle's house unannounced. They lived in a small ranch-style home about 20 minutes away. The house we'd helped with the down payment for as a wedding gift. Michelle's car was in the driveway. I knocked, waited. When the door opened, Michelle's expression flickered. Surprise. Then something else I couldn't quite read before settling into a warm smile. "Roxanne, what a nice surprise. Come in." Surprise. Come in. The house was neat, almost too neat. No evidence of the chaos I'd expect from caring for someone with Tony's level of injury. No medical equipment visible in the living room, no grab bars installed that I could see. "I hope I'm not intruding," I said. I was nearby and thought I'd drop off those books I mentioned. Is Tony awake? He's resting. The therapy really takes it out of him. Michelle gestured toward the hallway. "But I'm sure he'd love to see you. Let me just check." She disappeared down the hall. I used those 30 seconds to scan the room more carefully. Mail stacked on the side table. I saw envelopes from the insurance company, a law firm. A laptop sat open on the coffee table, the screen dark. Michelle returned her smile a bit tighter. "He's pretty groggy. Maybe come back tomorrow. He's always more alert in the mornings." "Of course." I held out the books. "Well, these are for whenever he's up to reading." As Michelle took them, a piece of paper slipped from between the pages. I placed it there deliberately, a bookmark. It fluttered to the floor near the coffee table. I bent to retrieve it, my eyes catching something on the laptop screen as it automatically lit up from the movement. An email partially visible. The sender, Dr. M. Harrison. The subject line. Next phase, timeline confirmation. "Got it," I said, standing quickly, handing Michelle the bookmark. My heart was pounding. "Thanks for the books. I'll make sure Tony gets them." Michelle was already guiding me toward the door, her hand light but firm on my elbow. As I walked back to my car, I glanced at the front window. Michelle stood watching me through the curtain, her phone already pressed to her ear. That night, I couldn't let it go. I called my old friend Patricia, who'd been the school secretary for 30 years before retiring. If anyone knew how to find information, it was Patricia. "I need to ask you something," I said when she answered. "And I need you to keep it completely confidential." "Roxanne, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I told her everything. The overheard conversation, the lies about therapy appointments, the email I'd glimpsed. Patricia listened without interrupting. "You need to get proof," she said finally. "Real documentation. If Michelle's planning something involving that settlement money, there will be a paper trail. How do I find it? Insurance companies, lawyers, medical records. But Roxanne, you can't just ask for those things without raising suspicion. Does Tony have power of attorney set up? I don't know. I assume Michelle handles all that now. That's what I'm worried about. If she has full power of attorney and Tony's declared incompetent due to his injuries and medication," Patricia trailed off. "She could control everything." I finished. Everything. The settlement, his medical decisions, all of it. I felt sick. What do I do? Or start with? What you can access legally, bank statements if you're on any joint accounts, any legal documents Tony might have shared with you before the accident. And Roxanne, be careful. If you're right about this and Michelle finds out you're investigating, she didn't need to finish that sentence. Sunday, I tried a different approach. I called the law firm handling Tony's accident case, Henderson and Associates. I'd met them once briefly at the hospital. "Good afternoon, this is Roxanne Sullivan, Tony Sullivan's mother. I'm calling to check on the status of his settlement claim." The paralegal who answered was polite, but firm. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sullivan, but we can only discuss case details with the client or his designated representative." His designated representative. That would be his wife, Michelle. "I can't confirm or deny." "Of course, I understand. Thank you for your time." I hung up frustrated. Every door seemed locked. That evening, Tony called me. His voice sounded different, sharper, more alert than it had been in our last conversation. "Mom, Michelle said you stopped by yesterday." "I did. I'm sorry if I intruded." No, it's fine. I wanted to ask you something." He paused, and I heard a door close in the background. "Have you noticed anything strange lately? With Michelle, I mean." My pulse quickened. Strange how, I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining it. The medication makes me confused sometimes, but I feel like I'm missing chunks of time. And Michelle keeps telling me things happened that I don't remember. Like what? Like appointments, phone calls. She said the lawyer called 3 days ago with an update on the settlement, and I supposedly talked to him for 20 minutes. Mom, I have no memory of that conversation. None. I gripped the phone tighter. Tony, what medication are you taking exactly? I'm not sure. Michelle manages all that. Some pain medication, something for muscle spasms, something to help me sleep. She organizes it all in those daily pill containers. Do you know the names? No. I force my voice to stay calm. Sweetheart, I think it would be good for you to know what you're putting in your body just for your own records. Could you check the bottles? Yeah, I guess. Michelle usually? He stopped. She's home. I have to go. Love you, Mom. The line went dead. I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, my mind racing. Tony was being drugged into compliance. I was almost certain now kept foggy and confused while Michelle orchestrated whatever scheme she and Dr. Harrison had planned. But I still had no proof, nothing concrete, just suspicions, and overheard conversations, and a mother's desperate certainty that something was terribly wrong. Monday morning, I made a decision that terrified me. I drove back to Dr. Harrison's office, but this time I went inside. The receptionist looked up with a professional smile. Can I help you? Yes, I'm Roxanne Sullivan. I'd like to make an appointment for a consultation. I've been having some hip pain. And a friend recommended Dr. Harrison. Of course, let me check his availability. She clicked through her computer. I have an opening Thursday at 2. Perfect. As she took down my information, I glanced around. The patient files were visible behind her in a cabinet color-coded tabs, marking different sections. I notice you don't have many people waiting. Is Dr. Harrison accepting new patients? Oh yes, though he's been selective lately. He's starting a new phase of his practice. More specialized treatment. Specialized how? She leaned in conspiratorially. Between you and me, he's moving toward more long-term care cases. Patients who need ongoing therapy over months or years, better for business, I suppose. Long-term care settlement money. The pieces were clicking together. Well, I'm glad I called. See you Thursday. I left before she could ask any more questions. In my car, I pulled out my phone and did something I never thought I'd do. I Googled signs of medication overdose and drug-induced confusion. Every symptom matched what Tony had described. That afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Sullivan, this is Detective Jody Meek from the My Heart Stopped. Had something happened to Tony Financial Crimes Unit? I'm calling because your name came up in connection with an ongoing investigation. I'd like to ask you a few questions about Dr. Marcus Harrison. Would you be available to meet tomorrow? I gripped the steering wheel. An investigation. What kind of investigation? I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Are you free around 10 a.m.? Yes. Yes, of course. She gave me an address, the police station, and hung up. I sat in my driveway, shaking. A detective financial crimes. Dr. Harrison was already under investigation, which meant whatever he and Michelle were planning, I wasn't the only one who'd noticed something wrong. But it also meant I was running out of time. Detective Sarah Park. I'd misheard the name on the phone, was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her office was small, cluttered with file folders and a coffee maker that looked like it had seen better days. Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Sullivan. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. Can I get you coffee water? I'm fine, thank you. I sat my purse clutched in my lap. You said this was about Dr. Harrison in a way. She pulled out a slim folder. How well do you know Marcus Harrison? I don't really. He's my son's physical therapist. After the accident, tell me about the accident, so I did. The distracted driver Tony's injuries, the long hospitalization, the ongoing therapy. Detective Park listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. And your daughter-in-law, Michelle Sullivan, she's been managing his care. Yes, she's been wonderful. The word felt like ash in my mouth, but I needed to understand what the detective knew before I revealed my own suspicions. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm going to be direct with you. We've been investigating Dr. Harrison for insurance fraud. Multiple patients, multiple claims a pattern of documented therapy sessions that never actually occurred. My breath caught. Tony's appointments, possibly. We've identified at least 6 cases where patients believe they were receiving treatment, but clinic records show the sessions happened when Dr. Harrison was documented elsewhere, yet insurance claims were filed and paid for those sessions. The patients believed they were receiving treatment. I repeated slowly, even though they weren't. Detective Park's expression was carefully neutral. In several cases, the patients had memory issues, side effects from medication. They were told their spouses or caregivers confirmed the appointments happened, managed the transportation, everything. The patients themselves had only vague recollections. I felt cold. And the caregivers, that's where it gets interesting. In 4 of the 6 cases we've identified, the caregivers had personal relationships with Dr. Harrison, a brother-in-law, a former college roommate, in one case, an ex-girlfriend, and Michelle. I could barely get the words out. Detective Park opened the folder and slid a photograph across the desk. It showed Dr. Harrison and Michelle sitting at an outdoor cafe, their heads close together, his hand covering hers on the table. The date stamp was from 8 months ago, 2 months before Tony's accident. This was taken by a private investigator hired by Dr. Harrison's wife. She suspected an affair. She filed for divorce 6 months ago. I stared at the photograph before the accident. Yes, the implications crashed over me. They knew each other before Tony was injured, before he became Dr. Harrison's patient. We believe so. But Mrs. Sullivan understanding something and proving it in court are very different things. That's why I called you. We need someone on the inside, someone Tony trusts who can document what's actually happening. You want me to spy on my own daughter-in-law. I want you to protect your son. Detective Park leaned forward. If our theory is correct, Dr. Harrison and Michelle have been running a variation of this scheme with multiple patients, manufacture or exploit an injury, establish a long-term treatment plan, file fraudulent insurance claims, and in cases where there's a settlement involved, take the money and disappear. I finished. Possibly. Or maintain control of an incapacitated patient who's worth more alive and dependent than recovered. Mrs. Sullivan, has your son's condition improved at all in the past 6 months? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No. If anything, he seems worse, more confused, more dependent, despite months of therapy. Despite months of supposed therapy, Detective Park nodded. We need documentation records of medications, proof that Tony isn't actually attending the sessions. Michelle claims he has any financial documents showing where the insurance payments are going. How am I supposed to get all that without Michelle knowing? Very carefully, she slid a business card across the desk. That's my direct line. Day or night, if you feel unsafe at any point, you call me immediately. Do you understand? The word unsafe made it real in a way nothing else had. My own daughter-in-law might be dangerous. I took the card with trembling fingers. What about Tony? He called me a few days ago, said he was having memory problems. What if we don't believe he's in immediate physical danger? He's worth more to them, healthy enough to sign documents, but confused enough not to question anything. But Mrs. Sullivan, that settlement check is supposed to clear in 3 weeks. Once they have that money, the dynamic changes. What happens in 3 weeks? Detective Park's expression was grim. Best case, they disappear, and Tony's left in a nursing facility somewhere wondering what happened. Worst case, she didn't finish the sentence. I stood on shaking legs. I'll get you what you need. That afternoon, I did something I'd been avoiding. I called our family lawyer, James Mila. He'd handled Robert's estate when he died. Had known our family for 20 years. Roxanne, good to hear from you. What can I do for you, James? I need to know about power of attorney. If someone has it for a family member, what can they do? That depends on the type. Medical power of attorney covers healthcare decisions. Financial power of attorney covers assets, banking, that sort of thing. Is this about Tony? Hypothetically, if Michelle has both types of power of attorney for Tony, could she Roxanne what's going on? I made a quick decision. I need you to find out what legal authority Michelle has over Tony's affairs discreetly. Can you do that? A pause. That's a strange request. Please, James, I'll explain everything when I can. But right now, I just need to know what she can and can't do legally. Give me a day or two. I'll see what I can find. That evening, I drove to Tony and Michelle's house again. This time, I'd called ahead bringing dinner. Homemade lasagna, Tony's favorite. Michelle couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious. When she opened the door, her smile was strained. Roxanne, you didn't have to go to all this trouble. It's no trouble at all. How's my boy? Having a rough day, actually. Maybe this isn't the best, Mom. Tony's voice came from down the hall. Is that you? Michelle's jaw tightened, but she stepped aside. I walked past her, carrying the lasagna toward the kitchen. Tony was in the living room wheelchair positioned in front of the television. When he saw me, his face lit up and my heart broke. He looked terrible thinner than last week, his skin pale, dark circles under his eyes. Sweetheart. I set down the lasagna and hugged him carefully. He felt fragile, like he might break. "I'm so glad you're here," he whispered. "Mom, I need to talk to you about Tony, your medication." Michelle appeared with a glass of water and a handful of pills. "It's time. I just took pills an hour ago. That was a different prescription. These are for the muscle spasms, remember?" Tony looked confused. "I don't remember taking anything earlier." "You did right after your nap." Michelle's voice was patient, but I caught the edge beneath it. "Come on, take these so we can eat Roxanne's wonderful dinner." I watched as Tony obediently swallowed the pills. How many times a day was this happening? How many pills was he actually taking? "Michelle, could you help me set the table?" I said brightly. "I brought garlic bread too. It's in the car." "Of course." She followed me to the kitchen and I saw her glance back at Tony, assessing in the kitchen. I kept my voice light. "He seems more tired than last time I saw him. The therapy is intense. Dr. Harrison is really pushing him to make progress. That's wonderful. When's his next appointment? Maybe I could drive him. Give you a break." "Oh, that's sweet, but I have it handled. Thursday morning. Same time as always." The briefest hesitation. "Yes. 10 rosary." I smiled. "You're such a devoted wife. Tony's lucky to have you." While Michelle set the table, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I slipped into the bedroom. Their bedroom. My heart pounded as I quickly scanned the room. On the nightstand, a plastic organizer with days of the week labeled each compartment filled with pills. I snapped a quick photo with my phone. On the dresser, papers stacked and waiting for filing. I rifled through them quickly. Medical bills, insurance statements, and then a bank statement. Not Tony and Michelle's joint account, a different bank, an account in Michelle's name only. I photographed the account number and the balance. $47,000. "Roxanne, did you get lost?" Michelle's voice came from the hallway. I shoved the papers back, my hands shaking. Coming. Just freshening up. At dinner, I watched Michelle carefully portion Tony's food, cutting everything small, treating him like a child. I watched her steer every conversation away from topics that might require Tony to remember specific details. I watched her refill his water glass 4 times, each time adding a powder she claimed was an electrolyte supplement. And I watched Tony grow increasingly drowsy as the meal progressed, his words slurring, his eyes struggling to focus. "I think I need to lie down," he finally said. "Of course, honey." Michelle was already standing. "Let me help you. Mom, don't go yet." Tony reached for my hand. "Stay, please. I'll stay right here. You rest and I'll clean up." Michelle wheeled him toward the bedroom. At the doorway, she looked back at me, and for just a second, the mask slipped. What I saw wasn't warmth or gratitude. It was cold calculation. When she returned 10 minutes later, I was washing dishes, playing the helpful mother-in-law. "He's out cold," Michelle said. "The pain medication really knocks him out." Poor thing. "Michelle, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "The settlement check. When does it arrive?" Her shoulders tensed slightly. "Soon, a few weeks," the lawyer said. "That must be such a relief. All those medical bills." "It is. Tony deserves it after everything he's been through." I dried my hands and turned to face her. "And what happens after he continue therapy? Will you move to a more accessible house? We're still figuring that out. Why all the questions? I'm just trying to help. You've been carrying so much on your shoulders." Michelle's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I appreciate that, Roxanne, but we're fine." "Really?" As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Detective Park. Did you get what we need?" I texted back the photos I'd taken. The pills, the bank statement. Her response came quickly. "Good work. Keep your distance now. Well, take it from here." But I couldn't keep my distance. Not when Tony had whispered to me as I'd said goodbye, his voice barely audible over Michelle's presence. "Mom, something's wrong." "I don't know what, but something's really wrong. Help me." The next morning, James Mila called. "Roxanne, I found what you asked for. Michelle has both medical and financial power of attorney for Tony, signed and notarized 6 weeks ago." My stomach dropped. 6 weeks. But Tony was still in the hospital, then barely conscious. According to the notary's signature, Tony signed these documents in his right mind, fully aware of what he was doing. That's impossible. "I thought you might say that Roxanne." "There's something else. The lawyer handling Tony's settlement case, he's filed paperwork to have the check deposited directly into an account accessible only by the power of attorney holder. Meaning, Michelle, can he do that? If the power of attorney is legitimate and Tony is deemed unable to manage his own affairs. Yes. What if the power of attorney was obtained fraudulently? A long pause. Then we'd need to prove it in fast because Roxanne, according to the court filings I accessed, that settlement check clears in 17 days. I hung up and immediately called Detective Park. "We have a problem." I said Michelle has power of attorney and the settlement money goes directly to her. "We're running out of time." "I know. We got the warrant approved this morning. We're moving in tomorrow to search Dr. Harrison's office and records. Tomorrow might be too late. Mrs. Sullivan, Roxanne. I need you to trust the process. Do not do anything to spook them. If Michelle suspects we're investigating, she could move up her timeline or disappear entirely." But that night, my phone rang at 11 p.m. It was Tony. His voice panicked and slurred. "Mom, I can't find Michelle. I woke up and she's gone. All her clothes are gone." "Mom, what's happening? I'm coming right now. Don't move. Don't do anything. I'm on my way." I called Detective Park as I sped toward Tony's house. "Michelle's running right now. She's already gone." How could she know we were Detective Park? Swore. Someone tipped her off. "Stay with Tony. I'm sending units to the house and putting out an alert for Michelle." When I arrived, Tony was in his wheelchair in the living room, looking lost and terrified. I searched the house quickly. Michelle had taken her clothes, her laptop, and from what I could tell, every document related to Tony's medical care and the settlement. She's been lying to me, hasn't she? Tony's voice was broken. All this time, I knelt beside his wheelchair and took his hands. "Yes, sweetheart. But we're going to fix this. I promise you, we're going to fix this." But even as I said it, I knew the worst was yet to come. Because 17 days from now, a check for $2.3 million would clear into an account controlled by a woman who just vanished into the night. And somewhere out there, Michelle and Dr. Harrison were together executing the final phase of whatever plan they'd been building all along. The police arrived within 15 minutes. 2 uniformed officers followed by Detective Park, who looked furious and exhausted. She immediately began directing the officers to photograph the house document what was missing and put out alerts for Michelle in her vehicle. I stayed with Tony, who seemed to be cycling through shock confusion and a desperate need to understand what had happened. "How long?" he asked me for the 3rd time. "How long has this been going on?" "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're gonna find out." Detective Park pulled up a chair across from us. "Tony, I need to ask you some questions. Are you feeling clear-headed enough to talk? I don't know what I'm feeling." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I keep thinking I should have seen it, but I can't remember half of what's happened these past few months. It's all foggy." "That's because you've been systematically drugged," Detective Park said bluntly. "We'll need to get you to a hospital, run a full toxicology panel. Whatever medications Michelle was giving you, they weren't what she claimed." "Drugged," Tony repeated like he was trying to understand the word. I squeezed his hand. "We're going to get you help." Detective Park's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "Excuse me a moment." She stepped into the kitchen, but I could hear her voice rising. What do you mean you can't find her? She left less than 2 hours ago. Checked traffic cameras, credit cards, everything. When she returned, her expression was grim. Michelle's car was found abandoned at a shopping center parking lot about 10 mi from here. She switched vehicles. We're checking security footage now. She planned this. I said she knew you were investigating. Someone warned her. Someone with access to information about our case. Detective Park looked at Tony, the lawyer handling your settlement. Henderson and Associates. Did Michelle have a lot of contact with them? I guess she handled all that. I was supposed to sign some final papers this week, but Michelle said we could do it later after I was feeling stronger. Tony's eyes widened. The papers. She wanted me to sign papers. What was I signing? We need to find out now. Detective Park was already on her phone. Get me a judge. I need an emergency order to freeze all accounts associated with the Sullivan settlement case. Yes, I know what time it is. This is urgent. Over the next hour, the house filled with activity. A paramedic arrived to check Tony's vital signs and draw blood for testing. A forensic accountant joined us spreading papers across the dining room table, and James Mella showed up after I called him, despite the late hour. Good grief, Roxanne, he said when he saw the chaos. What have you gotten into? We're trying to prevent my son from being robbed of his settlement and possibly his life. James' eyebrows shot up, but he immediately shifted into lawyer mode. What do you need? By 2 a.m, we had a clearer picture, and it was worse than I'd imagined. The forensic accountant, a sharp-eyed woman named Dr. Rice, laid it out for us. Michelle opened 3 separate accounts over the past 6 months. The one Roxanne photographed has $47,000. That appears to be from fraudulent insurance claims, filed for therapy sessions that never happened. But there's more. She pulled up bank statements on her laptop. 2 weeks ago, Michelle took out a $200,000 loan using this house as collateral. She used the power of attorney to do it without Tony's knowledge. She mortgaged our house. Tony looked stricken, but we'd almost paid it off. Not anymore. Dr. Rice said the money from that loan was wired to an offshore account. We're trying to trace it now, but these things are set up to be difficult to follow. And the settlement check? James asked. That's the real prize. $3 million set to be deposited directly into an account that Michelle controls. Once that money hits, she can transfer it anywhere in the world in a matter of hours. Detective Park leaned against the wall, arms crossed. So we freeze the accounts, get a court order to stop the settlement deposit, and validate the power of attorney. It's not that simple, James interrupted. The power of attorney was legally notarized. Unless we can prove Tony was mentally incompetent when he signed it. I was Tony said. I don't even remember signing it. Then we need the notary to testify that you weren't in your right mind. And we need the medical records showing what medications you were actually taking, which Michelle has apparently taken with her. Dr. Harrison will have copies, I said. Dr. Harrison is in the wind too, Detective Park informed us. We went to execute the search warrant at his office an hour ago. Cleaned out. His receptionist showed up for work this morning and found the file cabinets empty, the computer hard drives missing. He'd been there sometime during the night. The room fell silent. They've been planning this for a long time, I said quietly. This wasn't opportunistic. This was calculated, methodical, which means they'll have contingency plans. Detective Park agreed. Michelle knew we were getting close. Someone tipped her off and she activated her exit strategy. The question is, what else did she activate? Her phone rang. She answered, listened, and her face went pale. How much pause? Track it now. She hung up and looked at Tony. I'm sorry to tell you this, but 15 minutes ago, someone accessed your joint checking account and transferred out the entire balance, $32,000. That's impossible. Tony said, I have my debit card right here. She had online access and apparently a lot of your personal information. Detective Park's jaw was tight. She's burning everything, taking whatever she can get her hands on before we freeze her out completely. James was already typing on his phone. I'm filing an emergency motion first thing in the morning. But Tony, you need to understand, even if we stop the settlement money from going to Michelle, if that power of attorney is deemed valid, the court might put the funds in a trust until this is sorted out. That could take months, maybe years. I don't care about the money, Tony said, his voice breaking. I just want to understand why. We were happy. I loved her. Why would she do this to me? No one had an answer for that. At 3 a.m., Detective Park sent everyone home except the officer stationed outside the house. I refused to leave Tony alone, so I settled into the guest room after helping him to bed. But I couldn't sleep. I lay in the darkness, my mind racing through everything we knew, everything we'd discovered. Michelle and Dr. Harrison had known each other before the accident. They'd been planning this. But how long? And was the accident itself? No. That was too dark a thought. Even Michelle couldn't have arranged for a delivery truck to hit her own husband, could she? At 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee. Tony wheeled himself into the kitchen 20 minutes later, looking as exhausted as I felt. Did you sleep at all? I asked. Not really, Mom. I've been thinking. The accident. I've been trying to remember the details. Tony, you don't have to. I need to because there's something that's been bothering me. He accepted the coffee I handed him that day. I was supposed to meet Michelle for lunch downtown at that Italian place we liked, but at the last minute she called and asked me to pick her up from Dr. Harrison's office instead. My hand stilled on my coffee cup. Michelle asked you to go there. Yeah. She said her car was making a weird noise and she didn't want to drive it. She asked me to get her and we'd take my car to the restaurant. He stared into his coffee. The accident happened 2 blocks from Dr. Harrison's office. That delivery truck ran the red light right as I was turning. Tony, are you saying I'm saying Michelle sent me to that exact location at that exact time and she wasn't there? When I woke up in the hospital, she said she'd still been inside the office waiting. She came to the hospital as soon as she heard. We looked at each other, the horrifying possibility hanging between us. We need to tell Detective Park, I said. But before I could reach for my phone, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I saw a silver sedan in the driveway. A woman in an expensive suit stood on the porch holding a briefcase. I opened the door cautiously. Yes, Mrs. Roxanne Sullivan. Her smile was professional, polished. My name is Victoria Brennan. I'm an attorney representing Michelle Sullivan. May I come in? Absolutely not. I understand you're upset, but I have documents that need to be signed. Time-sensitive documents regarding the settlement and Tony's ongoing care. Tony isn't signing anything without his own lawyer present. Victoria's smile never wavered. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, Mrs. Sullivan Michelle holds power of attorney. She's authorized to make all legal and medical decisions on Tony's behalf. These documents simply formalize the transfer of the settlement funds to the appropriate medical trust that's been established for Tony's long-term care. That's a lie. Tony appeared behind me in his wheelchair. I never authorized a medical trust. Mr. Sullivan, I understand you're confused. Your wife has been very concerned about your memory issues and cognitive impairment. In fact, she's filed paperwork to have you declared legally incompetent due to traumatic brain injury sustained in the accident, what Tony and I said simultaneously. Victoria pulled papers from her briefcase. This is a psychiatric evaluation conducted by Dr. Harrison, declaring Tony Sullivan unable to manage his own affairs or make competent legal decisions. It's been filed with the court as of yesterday afternoon. That's fraud. I said Dr. Harrison is under investigation. Dr. Harrison is a licensed physician with an impeccable record. His medical opinion carries significant weight. And Mrs. Sullivan, I need to inform you that Michelle is also filing a restraining order against you. Against me, she believes you've been interfering in her marriage, causing undue stress, and attempting to manipulate Tony against her. The restraining order requires you to stay at least 500 FT away from Tony at all times. That's insane. The order has been approved by Judge Matthews. It goes into effect immediately. You need to leave this house now, Mrs. Sullivan, or I'll be forced to call the police. I looked at Tony, saw the panic in his eyes. I'm not leaving my son. Then you'll be arrested. Victoria pulled out her phone. Your choice. Wait. Detective Park's voice came from behind Victoria. She'd apparently been approaching the house when we opened the door. I don't think so, Miss Brennan. Roxanne Sullivan is a material witness in an active criminal investigation. She's also staying in this house at the request of the police department to ensure Tony Sullivan's safety. Victoria's expression flickered with annoyance. Detective, how convenient, isn't it, and that restraining order? I'm going to have that thrown out by noon. Judge Matthews is a friend of my father's, and he's going to be very interested to hear that he signed an order based on fraudulent psychiatric testimony. You can't prove I can prove a lot of things, including that you, Ms. Brennan, received a wire transfer of $50,000 from an offshore account 2 days ago, the same account Michelle Sullivan has been funneling money into. So not only are you complicit in this fraud, you're an active participant. Victoria's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Then you won't mind coming down to the station to answer some questions. In fact, I insist. Detective Park pulled out handcuffs. Victoria Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. As Detective Park read Victoria her rights and led her to the police car, I put my arm around Tony's shoulders. It's getting worse, isn't it? He said quietly. It's getting resolved, I corrected. One piece at a time. They're desperate, making mistakes. That's good for us. But even as I said it, I knew we were approaching the real crisis point. Michelle and Dr. Harrison had spent months building their scheme. They weren't going to let it fall apart without a fight. And somewhere out there, they were planning their next move. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Tell Tony I'm sorry it had to be this way, but the money's mine and he'll never see a penny. You should have minded your own business, Roxanne. I deleted it immediately, hoping Tony hadn't seen, but the message was clear. Michelle knew we were coming after her and she was ready for war. The next 72 hours were a blur of legal motions, police interviews, and medical evaluations. Tony was admitted to the hospital for a full toxicology screening, which revealed a cocktail of drugs in his system, benzodiazepines, opioids far stronger than necessary for his pain levels, and something called zolpidem that the doctor said was typically used for severe insomnia. These combinations would absolutely cause memory loss, confusion, and cognitive impairment, Dr. Martinez told us reviewing the results. The levels in his system suggest he's been taking these medications consistently for months. But the good news is with time and proper treatment, the effects should be reversible. How long? Tony asked. To clear your system completely, a few weeks, to regain full mental clarity, maybe a month or two, but you'll start feeling better almost immediately once we get you on the right medications. It was the first good news we'd had. James worked around the clock to file motions invalidating the power of attorney freezing Michelle's accounts and blocking the settlement transfer. Detective Park coordinated with federal agencies since the money trail crossed state lines and international borders, but Michelle stayed one step ahead. On the fourth day, James called with devastating news. She's filed for divorce and she's claiming she's entitled to half of everything, including the settlement. But the settlement is for Tony's medical expenses, I protested. In the state where they married and currently reside, assets acquired during the marriage are considered joint property. Unless we can prove the settlement is specifically designated for medical care and not general compensation, she has a legal claim. So after everything she's done, The fraud, the drugging, the theft, she could still walk away with over $1 million. If we can't prove criminal intent before the settlement clears, yes, the divorce court operates separately from the criminal investigation. She's playing both sides. That night, I sat with Tony in his hospital room. He was looking better already, more alert, more present, but the emotional wounds were deeper than the physical ones. I trusted her completely, he said, staring at the ceiling. Every pill she gave me, every appointment she drove me to, every decision she made, I trusted her. How could I have been so blind she was good at deception? That's not a reflection on you, but you figured it out. You saw through her only because I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. And even then, I second-guessed myself for days. I took his hand. You loved her, Tony. You're supposed to trust the person you love. I don't think I'll ever trust anyone again. Yes, you will. It'll take time, but you will, because the alternative is letting them win. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Park. Need you both at the station tomorrow. 10 a.m., major development. The next morning, we gathered in a conference room at the police station. Tony in his wheelchair, but looking stronger. James Detective Park and two people I didn't recognize. A man in his 50s with graying hair and a younger woman with red-rimmed eyes. Roxanne Tony. This is Thomas Bradford and his daughter Lauren. Detective Park said they've come forward with information about Dr. Harrison and Michelle. Thomas cleared his throat. My wife Patricia was a patient of Dr. Harrison's 2 years ago after a car accident, similar to Tony's situation. Dr. Harrison was her physical therapist. He was having an affair with my mother, Lauren said bluntly. We didn't know it at the time. We thought he was just being attentive, caring. Mom was so vulnerable after the accident. Thomas continued. Patricia had a settlement case too. Not as large as yours, Tony, but substantial. $300,000. She signed power of attorney over to me during her recovery, but somehow Dr. Harrison convinced her to revoke it and give it to him instead, said it was for a specialized treatment program. The money disappeared within a week of the settlement clearing. Lauren said Dr. Harrison claimed it went to medical expenses, but we could never get proper documentation. Mom was so confused all the time. Couldn't remember what she'd agreed to. Where is Patricia now? I asked gently. Thomas's face crumpled. She died 6 months after the settlement. Overdose. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. Said she'd been taking too many pain medications, got confused, but she was getting better before the money came through. After it was gone, she deteriorated rapidly. The room was silent. We couldn't prove anything, Lauren said, tears streaming down her face. We tried. We filed complaints, talked to lawyers, went to the police, but Harrison covered his tracks too well. And then he just moved to a different city and set up a new practice here. Detective Park said he moved here, and 6 months later, Michelle walked into his office as a new patient claiming back pain. Before she even met Tony, I asked, before she met Tony, we pulled phone records. Michelle and Harrison had been in contact for 8 months before she was introduced to Tony at that charity fundraiser where they supposedly met. Tony's face went ashen. She targeted me from the beginning. We believe so. Detective Park said you were a successful software engineer, good income-owned property. You were exactly the kind of mark they look for. But the accident, we're still investigating that. The truck driver who hit you had a clean record past all toxicology screens. It appears to have been genuinely accidental, but Michelle took advantage of it. Or she created the circumstances where an accident was likely, I said quietly. She sent Tony to that specific location at that specific time on a route she knew had dangerous intersections. Detective Park nodded. We're looking into that, but it's nearly impossible to prove premeditation in a traffic accident. Thomas leaned forward. The reason we're here, Tony, is because we want to testify. Everything we went through, everything Harrison did to my wife. We'll tell it all in court. We couldn't save Patricia, but maybe we can help you." "And there's more," Lauren added. She pulled out a USB drive. "After Mom died, I became obsessed with finding proof. I broke into Harrison's old office. I know it was illegal, but I copied files from his computer before he wiped it. I didn't know what to do with them at the time. Didn't think anyone would care. But when I saw the news about this case, I knew I had to come forward." Detective Park took the USB drive. What's on it? Spreadsheets, patient names, settlement amounts, account numbers, it's all there. Harrison's records of every person he scammed, including notes about Michelle and their plans for future targets. "Tony's name is on there," I asked. Lauren nodded, added 8 months before the accident with projected settlement amounts and timeline estimates. The room erupted. James immediately started talking about admissibility of evidence. Detective Park was on her phone calling the district attorney. Tony sat frozen, processing the reality that his entire relationship with Michelle had been a calculated con from the first hello. I squeezed his shoulder. "We have them now, finally." But Detective Park held up her hand, silencing everyone. She was listening intently to whoever was on the phone, her expression darkening. How much she swore under her breath. "Lock down everything now." She hung up and looked at us. "The settlement check cleared an hour ago. All $2.3 million. It was deposited into the account we thought we'd frozen, but somehow the freeze order was delayed in processing." "That's impossible," James said. "I filed that motion 3 days ago. Someone in the court clerk's office sat on it. We're investigating, but the damage is done. The money's already been transferred out in a series of rapid wire transfers. We're trying to trace them, but they're bouncing through multiple international banks." "So she has it," Tony said flatly. "Michelle has my money." "Not for long," Detective Park said grimly, "because we just got confirmation that Interpol has been tracking these same offshore accounts in connection with an international fraud ring. The money Michelle transferred it pinged every alert they had set up. They know exactly where it went, where I asked, the Cayman Islands. And here's the beautiful part. Michelle and Dr. Harrison flew there yesterday. They're at a resort in Georgetown right now, probably celebrating. And they have no idea that the Caymanian authorities are cooperating with U.S. law enforcement. You can arrest them, Tony asked better. We already did. They were taken into custody 2 hours ago when they tried to access the funds. Turns out the Cayman Islands take banking fraud very seriously, especially when it involves American victims. The relief in the room was palpable. But I'd learned not to celebrate too early. "What about the money?" I asked. "Frozen. All of it. Once we prove the fraud, which we now can, thanks to Lauren's evidence, every penny will be returned to Tony." "How long will that take?" James asked. "Months, probably." But the important thing is Michelle and Harrison are in custody. They're being extradited back to the U.S. to face charges, multiple charges. Fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, elder abuse. "I'm not elderly," Tony protested weakly. "You were a vulnerable adult under the influence of drugs administered without your informed consent. It counts." Detective Park actually smiled. "They're looking at 20 to 30 years each." Thomas Bradford wiped his eyes. "Thank God. Finally, there's going to be a trial." Detective Park continued. "Tony, you'll have to testify. Roxanne, you two. It won't be easy. I don't care." Tony said, "I want to face her. I want her to know that I know exactly what she did." 2 weeks later, I got my wish to face Michelle, though not in the way I expected. James arranged for us to be present when Michelle and Dr. Harrison were arraigned after extradition. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, other victims who'd come forward, prosecutors preparing their case. When they brought Michelle in, I barely recognized her. Her hair was unwashed, her expensive clothes wrinkled, but her eyes were calculating, searching the room until they landed on Tony and me. She smiled, actually smiled. The bailiff read the charges. 18 separate counts. The The judge set bail at $2 million, which Michelle's lawyer immediately protested she couldn't pay. Your Honor, the prosecutor stood. The defendant has access to $2.3 million that she fraudulently obtained. That money is rightfully mine. Michelle interrupted, ignoring her lawyer's attempts to silence her. I earned every penny. You want to know what it's like being married to a weak, pathetic man who can't even. Miss Sullivan, I strongly advise you to stop talking, the judge said sharply. But Michelle was done pretending. I spent 2 years setting this up. 2 years playing the devoted wife to that useless. She gestured at Tony, waiting for the right moment. And I would have gotten away with it if his meddling mother hadn't. That's enough. Her lawyer was physically trying to cover her mouth, but the damage was done. Michelle had just confessed to everything in open court on the record. The judge's face was like stone. Bail is denied. Remand the defendant to custody pending trial. As they led Michelle out, she looked directly at me. This isn't over, Roxanne. I have lawyers. I have friends. You think you've won, but actually it is over. I said clearly. You lost the moment you underestimated what a mother would do to protect her child. Michelle's expression twisted with rage as they pulled her away. Dr. Harrison's arraignment was next. He was quieter, more composed, but his lawyer couldn't prevent the prosecution from presenting Lawrence's evidence, the spreadsheets, the detailed records of his schemes. Your Honor, we have documentation showing Dr. Harrison and Ms. Sullivan engaged in a pattern of fraud spanning 6 years, involving at least 12 victims across 4 states, totaling over $4 million in stolen funds. The judge set Harrison's bail at $5 million. He couldn't pay it either. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Tony handled them with more grace than I expected. I want other victims to know they're not alone, he said into the cameras. And I want to thank my mother who never stopped fighting for me, even when I didn't know I needed fighting for. That night, back at his house, truly, his house now with all the locks changed and the mortgage situation being sorted out. Tony and I sat in his living room. How are you really doing? I asked. I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. He smiled slightly. But Mom, thank you for not giving up, for trusting your instincts when everyone else would have thought you were being a paranoid, interfering mother-in-law. I am an interfering mother-in-law. I just happened to be right this time. He laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in months. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Park. Final count 18 victims identified. Total fraud $6.2 million. Your investigation broke the whole thing open. The FBI wants to thank you personally. I showed Tony the message. $6 million, he said softly. How many lives did they destroy, not yours? I said firmly. You're still here. You're getting stronger every day. You're going to recover and move forward with you watching my back always. But even as I said it, I knew one more confrontation was coming, because in 3 months there would be a trial, and I would need to be ready. 3 months can feel like a lifetime when you're waiting for justice. Tony moved into physical therapy with a new doctor, a woman recommended by the hospital with impeccable credentials and zero connection to Dr. Harrison. Within weeks, the fog that had clouded his mind for so long began to lift. The real medications, the ones he actually needed, helped with pain, without destroying his cognitive function. And slowly, miraculously, he began to walk again. First with a walker, then with a cane. The doctor said his body had been healing all along, but the drugs Michelle had been feeding him had masked his progress, kept him dependent and confused. Without them, his natural recovery could finally happen. She kept me in that wheelchair, he said. One afternoon during a session, his voice full of wonder and rage. I could have been walking months ago. Don't think about what was stolen, his therapist advised. Focus on what you're reclaiming. Good advice. Hard to follow. The trial began on a cold morning in February. The courthouse steps were packed with journalists, cameras, and spectators. Thomas Bradford was there with his daughter Lauren. 3 other victims had come forward ready to testify. The prosecution had built a case so airtight that Michelle's lawyer had tried 5 times to negotiate a plea deal. She'd refused everyone. "I didn't do anything wrong," she'd told the prosecutor. According to James, Tony was incompetent. Someone had to manage his affairs. Her arrogance would be her downfall. The first week of trial was procedural. Jury selection opening statements, the prosecution laying out their case with meticulous detail. They presented the fraudulent insurance claims, the forged documents, the offshore accounts. They brought in handwriting experts who testified that Tony's signature on the power of attorney documents had been traced, not written freely. Michelle sat at the defense table looking bored occasionally, whispering to her lawyer, never showing a hint of remorse. Dr. Harrison's trial was being held separately, but his lawyer had convinced him to take a plea deal, 15 years in exchange for testifying against Michelle. The prosecution was saving him for maximum impact. I was called to testify on the 5th day. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Miss Delgato, walked me through everything, overhearing the conversation in Dr. Harrison's office, the lies about therapy appointments, the investigation I'd conducted, finding Tony alone with Michelle gone. "Mrs. Sullivan, what made you suspicious that first day?" Ms. Delgado asked. "A mother knows," I said simply. I saw my daughter-in-law's jacket through the window at a time when she shouldn't have been there, and I heard the tone in her voice when she spoke. It wasn't the voice of a concerned wife. It was the voice of someone planning something. Objection. Speculation. Michelle's lawyer called sustained. "Mrs. Sullivan, please stick to what you observed directly." I observed my son deteriorating under his wife's care. I observed lies about his medical appointments. I observed a secret bank account with $47,000 that had no legitimate source. I observed my son being drugged into confusion so his wife could control every aspect of his life and steal his future. The jury was riveting. Several members were leaning forward, completely focused. Michelle's lawyer tried to paint me as an interfering, jealous mother-in-law who'd never accepted her son's marriage. But the evidence was overwhelming. The photos I'd taken, the bank statements, the timeline Detective Park had constructed, it all told the same story. On the witness stand, I never raised my voice. I never showed anger. I simply told the truth calmly and clearly, the way I'd told thousands of stories to thousands of children over my decades of teaching. Facts, details, reality. The defense couldn't shake me. Tony testified on the 7th day. He'd been dreading it, but he was stronger now, physically and emotionally. He walked to the witness stand with only a slight limp, took the oath, and sat down. The prosecutor led him through his relationship with Michelle, the accident, the months of fog and confusion. "Mr. Sullivan, did you knowingly sign power of attorney over to your wife?" "No, I have no memory of signing those documents. And based on the medical testimony about what was in my system at the time, I couldn't have understood what I was signing even if I had. Did you authorize your wife to take out a $200,000 loan against your house? Absolutely not. Did you know she was having an affair with Dr. Harrison? No. Did you authorize the transfer of your settlement funds to offshore accounts? No. I thought that money was going to pay for my medical care and our future. I trusted my wife completely." His voice broke on the last word. Several jury members looked visibly moved. Michelle's lawyer was gentler with Tony than he'd been with me, but he still tried to suggest that Tony had been aware of the financial arrangements, that his memory problems were exaggerated. "Mr. Sullivan, isn't it true that you signed multiple documents during your recovery?" I was told I did. "I don't remember it. Isn't it possible you simply forgot?" The medical experts testified that the drugs in my system would cause severe memory impairment. So, yes, it's possible I forgot. It's also possible I was unconscious or incoherent when someone guided my hand to sign. I don't know. That's the point. I was kept in a state where I couldn't know. The lawyer couldn't argue with that. On the 10th day, Dr. Harrison took the stand. He'd aged visibly in the 3 months since his arrest. The confident, charismatic therapist was gone, replaced by a nervous man who couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Under oath, he laid out the entire scheme, how he'd done it before with other patients, how he'd met Michelle when she was working as a pharmaceutical sales representative and realized she had the perfect personality for long-term cons. Charming, patient, ruthless. We would identify targets, he testified. People with good insurance, potential injury, settlements, assets we could access. Michelle would arrange to meet them socially, start a relationship. I'd establish myself as their medical provider, and then the prosecutor prompted. Once she had access, usually through marriage, we'd create dependency. The medications kept them confused enough not to question anything but functional enough to sign documents. We'd file false insurance claims for treatments that never happened. And if there was a major settlement or inheritance, we'd take it and move on. How many times did you and Michelle Sullivan execute this scheme? Tony was the 7th. The courtroom erupted. The judge had to call for order. 7 victims, Miss Delgado said, letting that sink in. And Patricia Bradford Thomas's wife. Dr. Harrison's face crumpled. That wasn't supposed to happen. She took too many pills one night. It was an accident caused by months of you deliberately confusing her medication regimen and keeping her dependent on drugs she didn't need. I never meant for her to die. But you did mean to steal her money. You did mean to destroy her family's financial security. You did mean to betray your oath as a physician. Yes. His voice was barely audible. Michelle's lawyer tried to suggest that Harrison was lying to reduce his own sentence, that Michelle had been manipulated by him, not an equal partner. But the evidence contradicted that emails, text messages, the detailed planning documents Lauren had recovered. Michelle had been the mastermind. Harrison had been the tool. On the 13th day, Michelle took the stand in her own defense. Her lawyer had probably advised against it, but Michelle's arrogance wouldn't let her stay silent. She wanted to explain herself to justify everything. It was a spectacular mistake. I loved Tony. At first she testified, but after we married, I realized he was weak, boring. He worked all the time, never wanted to do anything exciting. I felt trapped. So you decided to steal his money, the prosecutor asked on cross-examination. I decided to take what I deserved for 2 years of pretending to be happy in a dead-end marriage. And the accident, the one that nearly killed your husband, was convenient timing. Michelle's smile was cold. I didn't cause it, but I certainly took advantage of it. You kept him drugged and confused for 6 months. I kept him manageable. If he'd been clear-headed, he would have interfered with the financial arrangements. You mean he would have stopped you from stealing his money? I earned that money. Do you know how exhausting it is to play the devoted wife? To pretend to care about someone's boring physical therapy stories, to act grateful for his mother's casseroles? She shot a venomous look at me in the gallery. I deserved compensation for that performance. The prosecutor paused, letting Michelle's words hang in the air. Ms. Sullivan, do you feel any remorse for what you did to Tony? Remorse? Michelle laughed. He's fine. He's walking again. His mother saved him. Everything worked out. He should be thanking me for making his life interesting. The jury's expressions were unanimous disgust. The prosecutor had one more question. If you'd gotten away with it, if Roxanne Sullivan hadn't overheard your conversation that day, what would you have done next? Michelle shrugged. Marcus and I had already identified the next target. A widower in Colorado just inherited $3 million from his parents. We would have been engaged by summer. She said it so casually, like she was discussing vacation plans. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all 18 counts. Michelle showed no emotion when the verdict was read. She simply stood there stone-faced as the judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Dr. Harrison, who'd testified against her, would get his 15 years. Michelle, who'd shown no remorse and demonstrated clear intent to continue her criminal activities, faced a much harsher sentence. At sentencing, the judge allowed victim impact statements. Thomas Bradford went first, describing how his wife's death had destroyed their family, how his daughter still had nightmares, how they'd lost their home trying to fight Harrison legally. 3 other victims spoke, people I'd never met who'd been bankrupted, traumatized, left with nothing. Then Tony wheeled himself forward. He'd chosen to use the wheelchair today, a visual reminder of what Michelle had done. "You didn't just steal my money," he said, looking directly at Michelle. "You stole 6 months of my life. You kept me imprisoned in confusion and dependency. You made me doubt my own mind. You destroyed my ability to trust anyone." He paused and his voice grew stronger. "But you didn't win, because my mother loved me enough to see through you. Because I had people who fought for me, because justice, however slow, still exists. You'll spend the next decades in prison, and I'll spend them rebuilding my life. I already know who comes out ahead." Michelle's expression finally cracked. For just a moment, I saw rage and something else. Maybe the first hint of understanding that she'd lost everything. The judge sentenced her to 32 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 20. "You are a predator," the judge said. "You systematically destroyed lives for profit, showed no remorse, and indicated clear intent to continue. This sentence reflects the severity of your crimes and the need to protect society from you." As they led Michelle away, she looked back one last time, not at Tony, at me. "You should have minded your own business," she said. I smiled. "My son is my business." 3 months after the trial, Tony sold the house. "Too many bad memories," he said. He found a small condo closer to my place, something manageable with no history. The settlement money, all of it was returned. Tony used it to pay off every debt, set up a trust for his continued medical care, and donate a substantial amount to organizations supporting fraud victims. "I don't want money that came from so much pain," he explained. "I want a clean start." He went back to work part-time, gradually rebuilding his career. His limp faded to almost nothing. His smile came back. And I learned something important. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, investigate. When someone you love is in danger, fight. Age isn't a limitation. It's an advantage. 63 years of living, of observing people, of understanding patterns. That's a powerful tool. One evening, Tony came over for dinner. I'd made pot roast, his favorite. We sat at my old kitchen table, the one Robert and I had bought when Tony was a baby, and talked about everything and nothing. "Mom," he said as he was leaving, "I've been thinking, I want to work with fraud victims. Use what happened to me to help others. That's a wonderful idea. Would you help? You're the one who figured everything out. You could teach people what to look for, how to protect themselves." I thought about it. Retirement had been quiet, peaceful. This would be complicated, potentially painful, but it would matter. "Yes," I said. "I'll help." 6 months later, we launched a nonprofit, Sullivan Advocacy for Fraud Survivors. We provided resources, education, and support for people who'd been victimized by financial predators. Thomas Bradford joined us as a board member. Lauren volunteered her technology skills. Detective Park occasionally gave seminars on what to do if you suspect fraud. And I discovered a new purpose in my 60s, using everything I'd learned from my own investigation to help others. Michelle and Dr. Harrison's case became a cautionary tale. Studied in law schools and medical ethics classes, 17 additional victims came forward after the trial spanning 8 years in 3 states. Every single one of them got justice. One quiet Sunday morning, I sat in my garden, Robert's roses and my tomatoes, growing together, now a compromise we'd finally reached, and reflected on everything that had happened. I'd started this journey as a woman who'd lost her husband, who'd thought her purpose was finished, who was content to fade into quiet retirement. I'd ended it as someone who'd saved her son's life, brought down a criminal enterprise, and found new meaning in helping others. The truth is simple. Wisdom matters. Experience matters. A mother's love matters. And sometimes the most dangerous thing a criminal can face isn't a police force or a prosecutor. It's a 63-year-old woman who refuses to look away when something's wrong. I smiled, took a sip of my tea, and opened my laptop. 3 new emails from people seeking help with suspected fraud cases. My work wasn't done, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.